Photek. I'm here for Fact TV at Black Market Records in Darby Street, Soho, London. This is the record store where it all began for me. This is the birthplace of dance music in my mind. This whole area has such a special atmosphere. It's been the it wasn't just Black Market back in those days. But for example, this street, on the corner of this street, is the first time I ever saw Goldie. Before we knew each other, and I remember he had his Mercedes parked at the, gangster-looking Mercedes with his pit bull in the back on the corner of this street, and I came through and I went, that's Goldie. And I heard one of his early sketches of his album playing from the car. And moments like that really inspired you because you were getting closer to your heroes and, people, your influences. Suddenly within reach, touchable. Like, okay, we walk the same streets, we're in the same places. We're doing the same thing. Our paths are going to cross ultimately. Within 6 months, we were close friends. I remember nervously flicking through records, too scared to ask any questions in case I look stupid, and then occasionally going, well, this white label sort of looks like it's worth a bet. I'll take that, please, and then get home and find out what it was later. And half the time you've been told what to buy. The rest of the time you're just taking your chances and buying records, but it was all part of the fun. My first record I ever bought was actually The Message, Grandmaster Flash and a Furious 5. And I bought that from Boots, the chemist, when they used to sell vinyl. So I bought that on a 7-inch. But I think it's probably an R&S track was probably about the first 12 I would have bought at Black Market, I think. Probably like Jerry Beltram or something like that. They were incredible times. I mean, this is really where you'd get to hear music for the first time, maybe in the store or pirate radio. If you were lucky, you'd get to find out what the music was you were listening to. But most of the time you were discovering music, right here in amongst everybody else. This was the dungeon. This is where we came and bought our music and thumbed through white labels and, handed over our hard-earned cash. And this is a really special place for me down here in this basement. I mean, obviously, I miss the old days, but things have to evolve, and this is how that happens. I mean, you can't cling on to how things were. I mean, I wouldn't have made half the records I did if I was still looking backwards all the time. I tell that to people. If I was only making the Seven Samurai again and again, I would have never made my first album. That was a whole evolution forwards. So, you might make mistakes along the way trying new things, but I think you just have to. It's funny because I watched the Ben UFO interview, and it really reminded me of how I used to look at music, his whole approach and his demeanour. Then that reminds me of what I was like when I first started making music. It was that sound, it was that kind of obsession, that simple dedication to a sound, But it was very much part of the whole scene and how things worked back then. Very different world from today, where you can listen on SoundCloud and take your time and go through thousands of records. You'd sort of be down here with your hard-earned cash for a couple of hours, and some days were good, some days not so good. It's not so much about record buying for me now for new stuff, but I'll buy old stuff occasionally. So I remember the last few years spending a lot more time buying old jazz records and that kind of thing on my travels. Actually, as it happens, I'm going to take my stepdaughter record shopping when I get back to LA. It's her spring break, and she's a real music kid, and I really want her to get that experience. So we're going to do a bit of record shopping when we get back to LA and have her, dig through the crates and pick out stuff because she likes the artwork and do all the stuff that I used to do, This is one of the key records of where it all started for me. It's nice to see it on the rack in the shop where it all started for me, Still sounds futuristic even today. Well, they've got an amazing record store in Hollywood near where my studio used to be in Hollywood. It's called Amoeba, and it's an enormous used record store. They have the whole used section, 2 floors. It's like a warehouse of vinyl. And it's a pretty special place. There's not many places like that in the world. I mean, this place, I'm so happy that it's still hanging in here and still going strong. And I used to go to 4 Aces, Labyrinth in Dalston and Telepathy and some of those East London places where I used to go mainly. And the music that's around now reminds me a lot of what the vibe was back then. So it's like a crazy mix of sort of rugged, street-sounding stuff with weird, uplifting, you know, strange melodies and odd vocals. And I find a lot of the new music that's coming from new producers has a lot of that in it. It seems like coming full circle for me, really. I feel like drum and bass is as far as I could take it away from what I was first raving to, which was Belgian techno, weird London breakbeat jungle and like odd electro, basically. And drum and bass was as futuristic and as far as we could take that. So I feel like I've come full circle back to what I was first listening to or raving to. Well, there's some good people out in the stateside who I want to mention, like DJ G, and Kuru, who I've been doing bits and pieces with. They have a good understanding of London style music, so it's nice to have some people in the States who get that, who I can work with. London's a lot more of an intense place to live. Mm-hmm. Like the vibe it's just stronger generally just on the street, and the way people go about their life is a bit more intense here. LA is very relaxed and people have all the time in the world, it's very easy. So the music's a bit less urgent sounding, I think. And that's definitely rubbed off on me a bit. So it's always good to be over here and get a dose of Europe and a dose of London every year or so, you know. I was actually on tour, and then Paramount Pictures hired me to do a score for a TV pilot for a TV series they were doing. And that's what kept me out there for the first 6 months. And then I extended my lease on my house for another 6 months, and before I knew it, I was selling up and moving out there. Even for my first album, it was very soundtracky, you know. I think I was watching Heat, the Michael Mann movie, constantly throughout making that first album, and that had a big influence. Who did the music for that? Elliot Goldenthal did the music for that movie, and that had a big influence on my first album, definitely. Probably that and Apocalypse Now. Yeah, that's been nice. 2 Grammy nominations, 2 years running. Yeah, I was never really expecting that when I started out making this music, especially because it's been cool projects that the nominations have been for. The first one was Daft Punk from the Tron movie, and the second one was a remix for Moby, Lie Down in Darkness. So, you know, it could have been some awful cheesy pop remix that I was trying to do undercover and ended up getting nominated for, but it happened to be 2 very good, you know, very cool, credible projects, you know, so that's been pretty amazing. I think I'm going to be making, I'm going to probably split things 2 ways. I'm probably going to have a bit more sort of rugged bass stuff meets techno. That's going to be more for me to DJ with. And then I think I'm going to dip into some really classic Photek and go back into modus operandi, my first album, and start looking at turning that into a live show possibly for next year. So I'm going to be doing a classic soundscapey side of me and